that was the same attitude that George III had, and I would recommend that they go back and get a re-education and find out what happened to George III. He actually ended up in a nut house, kind of like the city over there. The firearms debate is going to go on. As long as there's a struggle for freedom. And there's always going to be a struggle for freedom, because there's always going to be somebody that thinks they know more than we do and they're better than we are, and they're doggone well going to tell us, and if we don't like it, they're going to do whatever they have to do, including barbecue. Well, when that long train of abuses was being suffered by our forefathers, they began to become convinced that a line had to be drawn in the sand, particularly after those city people. The folks in Boston fell for the, well, this is for your own good, let's register your guns. And after the guns were registered, the Brits did what all registering authorities want to do. They confiscated their guns, and then they banned the importation of guns and ammo. And then when they started to shut down the operation, the meetings of legally sanctioned militia, that's when George Mason knew that something was going to happen, particularly after the government shot at the people at that little thing called Lexington Green. And he penned the phrase, a well-regulated militia. Now, he wasn't just talking about something that George III could play with. In fact, he went on to explain in the same breath, a well-regulated militia represents the embodiment of the power of the people. So right here is a sovereignty device. And when you take away my sovereignty device, you've just committed a coup d'etat. You've just removed the sovereign's tool from the sovereign. That's what's wrong with that city over there.
Are you with Freedom League?
They are a bunch of disarmed people who actually, I think, invited in the tanks and whatnot to disarm them. They seem to think that's cool. They've got the Stockholm Syndrome. God forbid we ever get used to the tyranny that we're being saddled with in this country. It's still relatively soft. But you know, when we pass laws that say that a doctor's opinion can lead to you losing your right to keep and bear arms without a trial, without any due process, man, we are so close to the way they did it in Nazi Germany, the way they still do it in Castro's Cuba. You know, Castro has some utility. He actually frightens a lot of the Hispanics in this country. I was talking to one in my church, and Obama was her default position, I know, the last election. And she now is alarmed by the guy, and what turned her channel was Castro congratulating President Hussein about his new health care, that you finally caught up with us. Caught up with Cuba. Isn't that marvelous? That ought to help educate a lot of people that we have a government that doesn't have a clue that it works for us, that it is we the people who did hereby establish and ordain this government. And you know what? We can just unestablish it too. That's part of that same Declaration of Independence that told the world that we were finished being pushed around by a little fat boy over in England. Now, thank you. I think what we should do is I guess it wouldn't help to change the wind, because then they would just come in the other way. We need to be looking at these elections as the way we're going to solve some of our problems. And don't think you wait until this coming November. We've got primaries going on still in many, many states. And this is the time for all us gun-owning voters to go rhino hunting. Now, in case you don't know, a rhino is a Republican in name only. And these are people that have been facilitating the Socialists and the Democrat Party, and it's time we get rid of the rhinos. They belong on our wall, not in our offices. Now, it's starting to happen. There's been a revolt against Washington's anointing of candidates. It's going on in the Florida Senate primary for the Republican nomination. It's going on in the Kentucky nomination fight. And in both those places, real Americans are leading the rhinos. And now out in Utah, about 3 weeks ago, very uber-liberal Senator Bob Bennett, a Republican, I think he met his Waterloo. They had precinct caucuses, and he's probably in third place, maybe fourth. They're going to have a convention in a little bit less than a month, first Saturday of May, and I think we're going to see that one more rhino is going to be put on the wall. It's happening, folks, and it's happening right now. But while you're hunting, take along enough ammo that you can not only take a look at federal rhinos, but you want to look at state and local rhinos, particularly sheriffs. And the sheriffs are important because ultimately they are going to be the reason that we get a handle on the federal government through the 10th Amendment. We have seen enough states get together that they just simply told the feds, we don't want your national ID card that was embedded in the real ID. Would have had gun owners' information in there along with all other kinds of information. They think we're a bunch of cattle and it's perfectly okay for them to know everything about us. I want to know about their checking accounts. I want to know where their kids go. I want to know where they live. The heck with them knowing everything about me. They yammer about transparency, and they're about as transparent as muck. So we have seen the states simply say, we don't care about your sanctions that are in the, and had the feds pulled the trigger on sanctions. Am I allowed to say pull the trigger? A lot of us wouldn't have been able to fly on an airplane with our driver's license, wouldn't have been able to buy a gun with our driver's license. Shouldn't have to have any ID to buy a gun anywhere. That's something we're going to be taking care of. Absolutely. And so now the states have been coming to the point where they've been kind of catching on to this unconstitutionality of gun laws. And yeah, you can imagine George Washington was sitting there freezing to death in Valley Forge thinking, man, what we really need is some good regulation of guns. That's what it was all about, right? Isn't that what was in your history book? You probably didn't have a history book, I'm sorry. Exactly. So now we've seen the states raise the bar another notch, and they're saying, as you know, if we have a firearm that's made in our state and it stays in our state, it's none of your business, federales. And Wyoming has done it just a little notch up from that. They have said that, and if one of you federales attempts to enforce unconstitutional federal gun law in contravention of state law, you are committing a criminal offense. And of course, you know where you have to put criminals. Will the real criminal please sit down? Clang. They're all over there. They're the ones that are working on things that they have no authority to be working on, and then they expect us to smile when we pay our taxes.
Organized
Angry?
Not paying mine.
I think maybe we are. Now, we're probably going to lose in federal court, although we filed a brief on behalf of Montana in their lawsuit. It's on our website at gunowners.org, and we make the argument that, hey, not only does federal law say that a state can do this, it actually does. Our attorneys actually found where the federal law says that they're only there to help the states, and the states obviously have the ultimate authority for firearms. But that's just a federal law. Who cares about that? It's what the Constitution says, and that says, with the main body of the Constitution, the Second Amendment and the 10th Amendment says, no constitutional gun laws and regulation, period. That's our brief that we've got in for the Montana case. Well, we're probably going to lose because federal judges were put in by federal politicians, and they all assume that somehow policy is whatever comes into their silly head, and there's no limits, and hey, they won the last election, so sit down and shut up. Well, we're not here to shut up. We're here to tell you something, guys. You're fired. And You can join the unemployment ranks with Bob Bennett. Actually, he's going to make a lot of money down on K Street, and so will Harry Reid. They'll probably work for the same lobbying firm, won't that be? They work together.